So, I had less than 24 hours left in South Korea before I was due to fly out, but I still had some film that I wanted to finish. So this video is going to be the behind the scenes of that day of film photography, shooting streets and film in Seoul, South Korea. Previously I flew with my high-speed film, and some of it got a little bit ruined. I still shot it and it was fine, but clearly there was some damage. And I still had a bunch of film left over. I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes again. And of course I could have found out how to fly with the film without damaging it, but that would have been so boring, wouldn't it? So instead I decided to make it a fun challenge for myself. I was gonna try to finish all the high-speed film that I had left before I had to start packing and preparing to leave the country. Especially because I knew I was gonna be heading to Finland next, where I probably wasn't gonna be shooting much street. I had 2 rolls of Portra 800 and 2 rolls of Cinestill 800T. One of them was already in my camera though, so it was like half finished. And then I also had Ilford Delta 3.2K. Never shot this film before, was really curious how it would turn out. And my main weapon for the day, probably shouldn't call it a weapon in context of shooting on YouTube. My main camera for today was the Fujifilm TX1, aka Japanese XPAN, which I'm probably gonna call XPAN for simplicity's sake. I know some of you fellow autist people are triggered by that, so I apologize in advance. And I also had my Ricoh GR1V for the other roll of Cinestill. That one I kind of covered in 2 previous videos already, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. Anyway, this video starts only a couple hours after I finished recording the previous video on this channel, so it was basically like non-stop photography for my last day. A real fun time, even though exhausting at times. Let's get to the main part of the video. As you can see, it's still kind of raining, so guess I'm gonna go shoot some film while I still got the chance. My ridiculous coffee. My B-roll from today is just like my hair from the intro, a little bit all over the place. I'm just gonna attribute that to lack of sleep. On both occasions. On the previous night I noticed there was these temples in Dongdaemun that I never really went to before, so that's where I'm gonna walk today. But of course on the way I snap some photos as well. Finishing 5 rolls of film in less than a day is a tall order. If you don't immediately start shooting, you can't save the photos too much or you'll never finish. So I have to adjust a little bit in my usual filter that I have internally, but the first photos don't look too bad. Probably partly because the XPAN is such an awesome camera and the aspect ratio is so cool and cinematic. I've adjusted the white balance of the Portra 800 a little bit colder in Lightroom, simply because I feel like it suits the scenes better when it's raining and cloudy. Coming up is a very simple lesson in color contrast. For me, I never really get tired of going to the same place as long as the conditions and the light is different, and there's definitely a place that is always different depending on the conditions and time of day. Now when you're talking about 5 rolls of film, or technically a little less than 5, 4.5-ish, it's not actually that many photos. It's like 130 photos approximately. Even a little bit less when you're considering XPAN photos or 20 photos. So it doesn't really sound that much when you think about it in that way. But for me, I don't like to shoot film like I shoot digital. I want to consider my film photos quite a lot more than my digital photos. I mean, because otherwise it's almost no point to shoot film in the first place. I feel film is supposed to be a more thought out format of photography than digital photography. And especially with the rising cost of film, that just makes sense. It's more planned, more considered, and it's also one of the reasons why it is such an enjoyable pursuit to do film photography occasionally, because it's so different from digital in that mindset. So with that in mind, it was a little bit challenging to find the balance between just shooting photos because I wanted to finish the rolls, but still making sure that they're somewhat usable, somewhat valuable, that I'm not just taking useless photos for no reason just to finish the roll, that I actually get some results. I also had my Ricoh GR3 in my pocket, as always, just as a backup camera, and again it came in handy because at one point my XPAN again ran out of battery. At which point I kind of panicked a little bit. I thought maybe I finally did break a camera in the rain, because I literally just got new batteries for the XPAN like a week before, and it was not supposed to run out this quickly. In any case, I took a couple of photos with the Ricoh, and I knew there was a film shop pretty close by, about 10-minute walk away. So that's where I started to head, because at least I could still get like a week of use out of my XPAN even if I got new batteries, and considering the situation, it wasn't the worst deal. I'd worry about it later. But when I got to the film shop and I got new batteries and I started changing the batteries, to my surprise, 2 batteries came out instead of 1. And that was the problem, because earlier I only bought 1 new battery, and that's the entire reason that the camera ran out of batteries so fast. Because I didn't realize there's 2 inside. I also only bought 1 the last time. And yeah, that was a pretty funny moment, and also very relieving, because this is definitely not the camera that I want to break. I literally break any of my other cameras before this one, because this one's really difficult to repair. For context, the first battery lasted like 6 months, so a week of battery use is not very good. So anyway, after this brief break, I got to continue shooting the XPAN. The next few shots have exaggerated promised glow because I kept my camera in a bag and the lens probably captured some moisture. This has happened before. And that, by the way, is my hotel where I went to take a brief lunch break. And I took these photos out of a random window on the hallways of one of the top floors in my hotel. That's something that I always like to check whenever I'm staying in a new place. If there's a nice view available somewhere, perhaps on the rooftop, perhaps in a random hallway, fire escape, whatever. And that marked the end of roll 1, and now we're gonna switch to Cinestill 800T and head out to the streets once more. And naturally, because it's like December 1st, it's immediately Christmas time. The 800T white balance definitely naturally out of the box better than Portra. It's colder. As a bit of a crypto bro, I always enjoy seeing real life crypto establishments. These 2 coming shots I really like, also partly because the composition is something that is very unique to the XPAN. The sense of depth and the composition wouldn't necessarily be possible with any other type of camera. It wouldn't be as powerful. And even looking through the viewfinder, you can't really see how the shot is gonna turn out. When I got these back, I was really happy with these 2 photos. Then we have a couple of fillers that are nice minimal compositions, but nothing really special. When I posted this following clip on Instagram, I received a rude comment, somebody telling me that I should only stick to photography. Frankly, I have no idea what they're talking about. If you saw my previous video, you might remember these alleys, and I decided to go and check them out in this light. But to be franklin, they're quite boring in this light, especially because I'm used to them looking super awesome in the rain at night. Now it's very bland. Took 1 photo, it looks alright in hindsight, but at the time I wasn't very inspired by this location. But I think it's because the alleys looked so much more awesome during the night. Now that I have a little bit of distance between looking at these photos, making this video like 3 months after, they're starting to look quite cool again. Except for this photo, of course, where I totally screwed up both the composition not being close enough, and I also had some motion blur. I wish I did a little bit more vlogging on this day, but to be honest, I just forgot. But now that I'm editing these videos, I realize how much that adds to the storytelling element. So yeah, once I get out there, I'm gonna be better at the vlogging aspect as well. Anyway, this is the last shot with the Cinestill 800T, and now we're gonna switch to Portra 800 again. Even if we ignore that transition of gender, this is a pretty good example of a shot with decent composition but a boring subject that could have been improved with a 20 to 30 minute wait in this one location. But again, we are faced with the problem of limited time and too much film to shoot. But definitely something I would do if I was still in Korea, just go back there and try to get a good shot and a nice subject in this location, because I quite like the composition. And the prom is definitely adding to the composition as well. Looking back at this point of the shoot, I'm definitely starting to slip a little bit in terms of timing. Sometimes it's easy to think of photography as a combination of gear and location and forget the skill aspect, but then days when you're really off, you get reminded that definitely your photography skills can vary even day to day, depending on your mood, level of sleep, and just general variance for whatever reason. Sometimes when I take a photo, I just go, that's shit, why did I take that photo? But I'm just a little bit off, a little bit hesitant. And that keeps happening recently. I mean, in the past couple minutes. Annoying. Gotta be more decisive, more accurate. But I'm gonna keep shooting anyway, because putting in the work is the most important part. And the sun is about to set, and I have about 10 to 12, 15 photos left of this roll of Portra 800. I figure I can still finish it, drop off my film at the lab, take a break, and then shoot my last black and white roll of Delta 3.2K. And even though a lot of these shots, not really what I would expect from myself, there's still a couple decent shots here. And considering the situation, I'm still glad that I went out and took these photos. It's not that they're all terrible, it's just a little bit inconsistent, and whenever you notice some very glaring obvious improvements that could have been easily made, like slight adjustments in composition or exposure, always annoys you. But again, that is how you learn as a photographer. The last two photos of the roll are taken inside of the film lab because I just couldn't find a photo to take. And now we're about to take a small break until we resume the shoot with some black and white film. This is a film rated at 3.2K, but some light research online says that it's really ideally shot at 1600 ISA, so that is the wisdom that I decided to follow. But regardless, it would come in handy shooting the XPAN at night. By now it is nighttime, it is very cold, I only have a couple hours left, so I head out to a place that I know very well to shoot some test shots at the design plaza that is a 5-minute walk away from my hotel room. I really do not have time to go further, and it's also freezing at this point, so I frankly don't want to go much further. Despite this being high-speed film, some of these still came out a little bit underexposed. That's simply because at f4, not every situation has enough light. And you can even see some motion blur in some of these, not in the background, but simply because people are walking too fast if they're too close to the lens, because I have to drop the shutter speed to 1/15th, 1/10th of a second to get proper exposure. So night photography is still quite difficult, at least in truly low light situations. As soon as there's a little bit of artificial light, we're fine. Because the weather has changed, it stopped raining and now it's like below 0 Celsius, my ears are about to fall off, and it's also very windy. I decided to prematurely end the roll and finish it at the airport the next morning when we had this nice sunlight hitting the airport. The airport was surprisingly deserted. Well, I guess it's not really a surprise, but it's definitely very dystopian and eerie.
Please wear a face mask for the health of you and the people around you.
And I guess that's it for the main part of the video. Despite it being a little bit rushed, I'm glad that I did this photo shoot, especially the roll of Cinestill gave me some decent results. Those rolls of Portra, a little bit rushed, would require shooting again ideally, but obviously I can't do that now. And I also learned something about the black and white film. I actually quite like those shots at the airport, even though they may be a little bit basic. I like the light, and it's definitely something that I want to keep exploring. I guess because I'm relatively new to black and white photography, I'm probably gonna overrate those black and white shots a little bit simply because I don't have as much experience in black and white photography, and they look better to me because, you know, I haven't seen that many black and white photos or taken many black and white photos. It's a pretty natural development in all kinds of photography. Whenever you're new to a genre, you're gonna think you're better than you actually are. You're gonna like those shots in that genre more than you actually should, at least in some weird objective critical sense in photography. But anyway, I guess we keep relearning the same lesson. Just make yourself go out, and eventually good things will happen in photography or otherwise. My next destination was Finland, where I was just gonna spend the holidays and see my family. I was hoping we would get some winter fog, but instead it was just really cold and depressing. We didn't really get the weather to shoot. We came close one day, but it wasn't enough for a complete photo shoot or a video to make about it. So unfortunately no videos from Finland this time. By the way, one way to really make yourself miss a country is to do vlogs and then spend a lot of time editing the videos. I'm really starting to miss Korea, and editing these vlogs is not gonna make it any easier. It makes it so much worse. I really can't wait to go back. Hopefully that'll be easier at some point. Anyway, if you enjoyed these videos, I'm gonna leave a link to a couple of playlists. I do both film photography vlogs and regular photography vlogs. You might like those as well. Thank you so much for watching.